Okay, be honest. When's the last time you sat down and nothing buzzed? Not I turned it on silent. I mean, no pull, no tug, no reflex check. Because lately, it feels like people are living in this constant low level alert. Like our brains are plugged into a socket we can't find. And then out of nowhere, people start craving the opposite: a bookstore night, a board game table, a film camera, wired headphones, little pockets of life where the feed can't reach you. So here's the mystery. Why does offline feel like something you have to plan now? And why are people suddenly romantic about old tech, stuff that used to be called inconvenient? A camera that can't show you the photo, a music player with buttons, a cord you can't escape. It sounds backwards until you realize we're not chasing old tech. We're chasing the feeling of owning our time again and having a device that doesn't own us.
This is where it gets uncomfortable because it's not just online, it's in the body. You reach for your phone without thinking, like scratching an itch you didn't agree to have. And the weird part is the itch isn't always boredom. Sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's silence, sometimes it's just a pause your brain can't tolerate. So the phone becomes this tiny escape hatch you keep opening. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, a minute, and suddenly your hour is gone. I started paying attention to when people check, not just how often. Like, what's the trigger? And once you notice it, you see the same pattern everywhere. Waiting for the microwave, standing at a crosswalk, sitting in a car for one red light, elevator ride, line at a coffee counter, that little moment where your brain goes, okay, nothing is happening. And instead of letting nothing be normal, we treat it like a problem that needs filling. Okay, so why does that happen? Here's the thing. Modern screens don't just show you stuff, they remove stopping points. No natural ending, no roll credits, no closing time. Think about old media. You never get that clean, we're done here feeling. So you stay not because you chose to, but because the environment doesn't let your brain land. And when your brain can't land, you start craving landing zones. That's why people aren't just going offline for productivity, they're doing it for nervous system reasons. Feeling equals escape hatch, and you don't even realize you're training yourself because it feels so small in the moment. And this is where the discipline conversation gets kind of unfair, because when people say just have better self-control, they're acting like you're dealing with a normal object. You're not. You're dealing with a machine that's built to keep your attention in motion. So I mocked up a little weekly checks page because once you visualize it, you stop blaming yourself. Receipt, weekly checks mock. You see spikes, you see patterns, you see that the checks aren't random. They happen in the same emotional weather: waiting, uncertainty, boredom, stress, low energy. It's not your week, it's you have triggers. And then I found something even more telling: the rituals people create. A phone basket at the door, a one album no skipping rule, a no screens during food rule, a we talk first, then we check rule. And these rules look silly until you realize what they're doing. They're creating endings, they're creating edges, they're creating a moment where your brain can finally say, okay, we're done, we can stop. That's what these analog islands are. Not a trend, not a vibe, a landing zone. And once you find one, you start realizing how rare it is to land. Because the opposite of wired isn't offline, it's settled.
Okay, so after you realize the wired feeling is real, the next question is kind of unavoidable. Why are people running toward old tech? Why would someone choose a camera that doesn't instantly upload, or vinyl that takes effort, or wired headphones in a world where wireless earbuds exist? On paper, it sounds backwards, but in real life, it actually makes a lot of sense once you notice what these tools quietly do to your attention. A lot of this isn't about the tech itself, and it's definitely not about pretending the past was perfect. It's about what the tech forces you to do while you're using it. Older tools tend to come with boundaries baked in, while newer tools tend to remove boundaries because removing friction usually increases usage. At a certain point, though, convenience stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like you're always on, even when you didn't agree to be. Let's start with cameras, because this one is the clearest.
A lot of people are using small digital cameras again, not because they don't know their phone camera is technically better, but because a phone camera is attached to everything else on the phone. When you take a photo on your phone, you're one swipe away from a notification, one tap away from a message, one red dot away from a quick check that turns into 10 minutes you didn't plan to spend. A separate camera creates a boundary that your brain can feel. It gives you a tool that does one job, and because it does one job, it lets you stay inside the moment you're actually trying to capture. You take the photo, you put the camera down, and the moment continues without immediately turning into posting, editing, comparing, or wondering if it looks good enough for the internet. There's also the look, and people do talk about it like a vibe, like this feels like summer or this looks like memory. Part of that is nostalgia, sure, but part of it is that phone photos are optimized to be clean, sharp, and perfect in a way that can feel almost clinical. Older digital cameras capture life a little messier, and that imperfection can feel more honest because real life isn't perfectly lit or perfectly still. Real life is motion, blur, a weird flash, people laughing mid-sentence, and scenes that feel more like a memory than a product photo. And then there's the part nobody admits at first. Limits change behavior. A dedicated camera changes how you shoot because you naturally take fewer photos. You aim more carefully, you wait for the moment, and you choose what matters instead of spraying 1,000 shots and sorting it out later. That choice makes the moment feel more valuable because you're not treating it like infinite content. You're treating it like something you're actually present for. Vinyl works the same way, just with sound. Vinyl is the funniest comeback if you only measure it by convenience, because it's obviously more work than streaming. But that's exactly why people love it, because vinyl isn't just a way to hear music, it's a ritual that shapes your attention. You pick an album, you take it out, you place it on the turntable, you lower the needle, and you commit to the experience for a while. Most importantly, you don't skip every 10 seconds when you're listening to vinyl, because the setup itself nudges you towards staying with what you chose. That's the opposite of how a feed works. A feed rewards constant switching, while vinyl rewards settling into a mood and letting it play out. That doesn't just change what you hear, it changes how your body feels while you're hearing it. Vinyl also forces a natural stopping point, which sounds small until you remember how rare stopping points are now. Side A ends and you have to get up and flip the record, which creates a built-in pause where your brain can actually land. You don't get sucked into autoplay, you don't get pushed into a new mood by an algorithm, and you don't get trapped in the one more loop. The music ends and your body gets a clean signal that it can stop and breathe for a second. If you zoom out, this whole old tech comeback stops looking like quirkiness and starts looking like a response to an environment. Modern digital life is built around maximizing engagement, which usually means more options, less friction, fewer endings, and faster switching. Humans aren't built to live inside that shape all day, so we instinctively start reaching for tools that reintroduce limits and endings. A camera ends after the photo, a record ends after a side, a wired cord ends when you unplug it. Those endings aren't inconveniences, they're relief because they give time edges again. There's also a social layer people underestimate. A phone is basically a private feed portal, which means it often turns you inward even when you're with other people. Old tech tends to invite conversation in real space. Someone sees a camera and asks about it, someone sees vinyl and asks what you're listening to, and someone sees wired headphones and laughs because it's a recognized bigger analog islands idea. Because an analog island isn't one object, it's a zone where it is in not being pulled constantly. So when you see someone carrying a little old camera again, or buying vinyl, or choosing wired headphones, it's usually not about the object itself. It's about what the object refuses to do. Because it refuses to scroll, it refuses to autoplay, and it refuses to optimize you. Instead, it waits for you to choose. And that is the most old school thing imaginable. Having a choice and feeling it.
So here's what I think is happening after watching all of this pile up. The real point is that people are trying to rebuild something modern life quietly removed, stopping points. Because once you notice the pattern, it's everywhere. The day doesn't really end anymore. Work bleeds into notifications, notifications bleed into entertainment, entertainment bleeds into just checking one thing. And suddenly, your brain is on call in the background even when you're technically relaxing. That's what being wired feels like. Not like you're doing something intense, but like you're never fully done with anything.
And the reason these analog islands feel so good is not because they're retro, it's because they are one of the only places left where time has edges again. When you pick up a camera that can't upload, you're choosing a moment that stays local. When you put on a record, you're choosing an experience that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then the bigger thing happens, which is kind of the whole plot twist of this video. These choices stop being personal habits and they start becoming social rules. Because an island doesn't really work if it's only in your head. It works when the room agrees. It's not that everyone suddenly hates technology. Most people don't hate it at all. They just hate what it does to the room when nobody's in control of it. You can feel it instantly, too. One person starts scrolling under the table and the whole vibe changes. The conversation gets thinner. Eye contact breaks. The room gets jumpy. It's like someone opened a door and let the feed energy leak in. That's what I want to end on because it's the part nobody really talks about. People aren't going backwards. They're trying to feel human again. And now the only question is whether we treat that like a cute trend or like a signal. So I want to know your version of this. What's your analog island? Like the one thing that actually makes your brain feel settled again? And what do you think you're protecting yourself from? Boredom, stress, the feed, or just being on call? Drop it in the comments because I'm genuinely curious what keeps you grounded.